This video will be a quick introduction into how to analyze a moral act. So we'll be using this formula all semester, and it boils down to three categories: the object of an act, the intention of an act, and the circumstances surrounding the act. So these three aspects are going to help us determine whether something is moral or immoral for anything we encounter this semester. But you always have to make sure that when analyzing a moral act, the person needs to be free. So if Mrs. Stompfel were to come up to me with a gun to my head and say, "Please rob the bank," I'm not a completely free person, so we can't really moralize my robbing the bank because she has forced me to do that. So as I said before, there are three aspects to every action. The first aspect is an action's object. This is the concrete physical action that you're doing. So if you go up to another girl's locker to steal her textbooks, the only thing we're looking at when we analyze the object is what you are actually doing. So for the stealing the textbooks example, we are just looking at you taking the books from another girl's locker. That is the concrete physical action you have taken. So for every action, we're going to start with what is the object, what is physically taking place in this moment. Next, we're going to look at why you're doing that. That's called the intention. So if we stay with our example of stealing another girl's textbooks, we could have a variety of intentions. One might be you hate this girl and want to see her fail out of Prez. That might be an intention, a why you're stealing her books. Maybe you couldn't afford books for yourself and you feel like you're justified in taking someone else's. That is another reason why you are doing something. Maybe someone dared you. Right? I dare you to go steal their books, so your intention is you're pranking this other student. That is the why. So whenever we look at an action, we're always going to look at what is taking place and why is it happening. In order to consider something moral, both the object and the intention have to be morally good in order for us to consider the action morally praiseworthy. So, for example, if I'm going to do community service down at Sacred Heart, that is a good action that I am doing. My object is serving other people. That is good. Why am I going to do it? Because I care that other people are suffering while I live such a comfortable life. I have a good object and a good intention. I'm being empathetic while at the same time serving humanity. But if you take the same object, going to serve at Sacred Heart, and I ask you why you're doing it, and you say, well, the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to get into college, well, then you see that your intention is not really that pure. You're really doing it for self-interested purposes, and it's not the most moral reason to be doing something. So now that we know that we should always look for the object and the intention, the last thing we consider are the circumstances surrounding an action. And there are going to be two different sets of circumstances we are going to consider. The first, we're going to look at the person performing the action. So let's say we have two different people, an 8-year-old and a 40-year-old, and they both go and steal something for their mother's birthday. Well, we know that stealing is wrong, and we would look at their intention to see why they're stealing it. Maybe they love their mother. Well, it doesn't really matter because you're still committing the theft. So already we have an immoral act. But we want to consider how responsible would we hold the person. So we look at their age. One is 8, one is 40. You would definitely hold the 40-year-old more responsible because of their education, because of their life status, because they know basic right from wrong, where the 8-year-old might still be in those, psychologically moral development, where they're still thinking that the love of their mother outweighs the theft in this action. You don't only look at age, you look at other things that might affect responsibility. So consider the economic status of the person, the psychological disorder that the person might be experiencing. Are they free to choose the action? So always look at who's doing the act and evaluate how responsible they could be held for that act. The next is you want to look at the content of the action itself, because even though stealing is wrong, there are certain types of stealing that are more wrong than others. So if the 8-year-old stole a greeting card and the 40-year-old stole a car, clearly the content of the action was very different, even though the object was the same. The card is not as serious of a crime as grand theft auto. You could also look at the result of the action. Stealing the card is not going to probably economically harm, to a great degree, the store where it was stolen from. But maybe the 40-year-old stole the car of a person who needed it to get to work. Well, the content of that action has very different circumstances surrounding it and would change the level of moral responsibility. You can ask yourself the question, what was the result of the action? Would it have been different if it were something else? Keep in mind that circumstances are secondary elements. They are not the core of an action. The core of any action is the object and the intention. That's how we're going to determine morality. Circumstances are only looking at how responsible we would hold the person. We could look at a child committing murder versus a stable adult. You're going to hold the stable adult more responsible than the child. It can also affect how good or evil something is. Cheating on homework versus cheating on an exam. One is clearly more serious than the other. But no matter how grave or outlandish, and you know me, I will give you outlandish circumstances, they cannot change an inherently immoral object into a good one. But they can change the responsibility of the person performing the act. So, to review. First, you're going to find the object. Is the object moral, immoral, or amoral? Does it have any moral worth? And right now we're just going to go with the concept of goodness based on what we've talked about. Second, what is her intention of each object? Is her intention moral or immoral? If any one of the first and second steps is evil, then the action is not morally praiseworthy. Then we need to judge whether the action as a whole is moral or immoral. Third, how do her circumstances affect her level of moral responsibility? Is it greater or lesser? And lastly, overall evaluate the action and then the level of moral responsibility. Rewatch the video if you need any clarifications. We'll be practicing this formula in class.